The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Felix Moreno, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello and welcome to the Gold Money Podcast. I'm here today with Michael Krieger, blogger at libertyblitzkrieg.com, investor and activist for freedom. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Felix. Great to be on with you.
So welcome to the Gold Money Podcast. Can you tell those listeners who haven't heard your previous appearances of the Gold Money Podcast a bit more about yourself and your website, libertyblitzkrieg.com?
Sure. I'll try to give you the quick rundown for those listening that don't know me. I originally started on Wall Street in 2000 at Lehman Brothers. I served in the equity research department in the oil and gas sector for 5 years. Then I moved on to Sanford C. Bernstein, where I was the commodities trading desk analyst, basically responsible for helping the analysts and our clients understand the commodity markets globally. I did that 5 years, and I couldn't take the business anymore. I mean, I just started to see a lot of the corruption and just the Ponzi-ness of it all that we all know about now. It's kind of mainstream. And I left. I resigned in the beginning of January 2010 and didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was just investing some family capital, and I continued to write because that was one of the things that I was known for at Bernstein was my writing macro. And then it just ended up getting picked up on Zero Hedge and Max Kaiser. I did some interviews with Max Kaiser, and then I really just decided to take it to the next level and focus on the activism and blogging and writing and not limiting myself to just financial or commodity matters, but discussing everything from civil liberties to spying by the government and gold and silver, everything. So that's what I'm doing now, and my website's libertyblitzkrieg.com, as you mentioned.
So we're going to talk about all of that, but actually, since you mentioned that you're a commodities analyst, tell me, did you get to analyze gold?
Oh, yeah, that's a funny question. So I wasn't supposed to. Now, at Sanford Bernstein, we didn't cover gold. We didn't have a gold analyst, which actually is not that uncommon on Wall Street. It's obviously a small sector that only became prevalent in the last 10 years or so. But I just did it on my own. I learned all these things. I realized no one at the firm was discussing gold. So that actually caused some interesting conversations while I was at the firm. But no, I was the guy that was commenting on gold, but I sort of created that role for myself. It wasn't intended to I wasn't supposed to be speaking on it. Let's just put it that way.
I can imagine. I actually had a similar experience. I was at an equity trading desk and I started writing about gold as well.
Yeah, you get some interesting responses internally.
But wait, so when you started analyzing gold, I imagine you started looking at it the same way you looked at other commodities, right?
Well, I mean, not exactly, because by the time gold came into my world, I had already noticed that oil and other commodities, and this is around 2007, were not trading on supply and demand and fundamentals anymore. They were trading on a weak dollar bet. They were all correlated. If you remember 2007, 2008, the correlation between the dollar and commodities was so strong. And so by that moment, I had already realized something was up with the currency. So I had when gold really came onto my radar, I already had been like, okay, well, this is a alternative currency, and I need to look at it from that angle. So not exactly.
Right. So, but I guess you didn't find much echo for those views.
No, in fact, I was told at my firm that there was no relationship between the dollar and commodities and oil or anything. Meanwhile, I'm looking at my Bloomberg screens and I'm seeing the correlation every second of the day. So it was an interesting dynamic. People have their worldviews, and when you're a fundamental analyst and you believe supply and demand actually prices, it's tough to convince them otherwise. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. And back then, if you recall, like Felix, I mean, at a traditional Wall Street firm, I mean, the notion of weak dollar and commodities, it actually was kind of controversial. Now it's not, but it was back then. So things have changed.
Did you live through the whole $140 per barrel oil?
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, the rise, the crash. I mean, I was fortunate enough to get sort of the both sides of that. It was probably a lot of luck involved as well. But I was calling it a bubble in the run up and just a dollar play, and then I sort of switched and got bullish too. So that's what really helped me gain a lot of client respect was being able to sort of time that roller coaster well. Which obviously is, and now it's almost impossible to call these markets. At least I've pretty much given up on trying.
Yeah, beyond technical analysis, it's very hard to try and do anything really.
Right. Nothing's really fun to, I mean, whereas back when I used to work on Wall Street, I remember even though things were manipulated, when I would see news, I could usually guess the reaction in the market. And I just haven't been able to see that or do that for years now. So it's just a different world.
It is. It's changed a lot. So let's talk a bit about the U.S. fiscal situation and why we should care about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, the interesting and scary thing about having the reserve currency, as you know, is that as long as it's functioning for you, you can get away with murder, literally and figuratively. And we're doing that in the United States. Now, the big concern with that is when these things go, they go rapidly and all at once. And sadly, when you have the reserve currency and you aren't producing or working to consume your lifestyle, which the United States as a country isn't doing, we're basically printing the money, protecting the petrodollar, and then sustaining our lifestyle. Over time, the economy gets completely hollowed out. And I think, that's what we're seeing now. And if you look at the jobs that are being created and you look at, how young kids have no jobs and the jobs they're getting tend to be in food services and bars. And I can tell you for a fact, just, in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, it's a college town. There are a lot of young people here. I have friends that are recently graduated from college. And yeah, I mean, they're like all working as bartenders or waiters. It's they really, and these are, this is a pretty affluent town. So it's I see it every day.
You can just imagine what things are like in Italy and Spain.
Yeah, no, I don't even want to think. Yeah, it's sad. It's sad.
It's sad, but I like to think that there's nothing that can't be fixed if people give up on the preconceptions and try and approach problems with an open mind.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. In fact, there is a silver lining to all this, and I've said this before to people. I'm like, look, if kids don't have jobs, right, but they're able to somehow, let's say, or people in general, and they're able to somehow get support from the state, perhaps in this time period, they're learning, they're taking some of their free time to figure out how things work and developing a paradigm or doing interesting things. I'm convinced that by the end of this whole thing in the Western world, what we will get on the other side is some really good literature and perhaps art, as people, don't have the buck to chase necessarily, and they just go do some interesting things. So that's what I hope happens, and I am optimistic that on the other side of this, we're going to have a much better world. But it's just the growing pains of it all are troubling.
Yeah, change is always painful.
Yes.
Especially when the currently established system has been ongoing for so long, it's going to be very traumatic. Anyway, so let's talk about gold just a bit more. You've obviously been in contact with hedge funds. You've been keeping track on what Soros, Paulson, and other hedge funds have been doing in gold. I think is it true that Paulson's gold fund is currently losing like 63% this year?
Yeah, I guess the latest stats came out, I think it was yesterday, and showing that it was down about 65% this year. Which doesn't surprise me, considering if you look at the mining companies and the gold price, it makes sense. But, for me, I've never liked Paulson in this trade, and, for a lot of reasons. But one of them is that, when he first started making waves about the bets he was going to make post the crisis, I was uncomfortable with a lot of them, like his positions in the banks and in housing and all that. And I just felt like I wasn't aligned with how I felt, a gold investor would really look at things. And so I felt uncomfortable with him in the trade to begin with. And then the fact that he's in GLD also,
right.
Just this overhang, and everyone knows there's this huge overhang and it's one guy and the performance is terrible. So I hate to say it, and I hope it's not true, but I always kind of felt in my head that the final huge run would be when Paulson is liquidated of his GLD, which may or may not happen. But that's always, it's been an overhang that's bothered me forever. Yeah, the other guys I don't really focus on too much. Soros, he's in and out. Other hedge funds, most hedge funds I don't think are really involved. As far as physical gold, the only ones I really remember, I think Einhorn's Greenlight bought actual physical. But other than that, I mean, it seems like the U.S. investors' vehicle has been the GLD, and we've seen all of the tonnage coming out of GLD recently. And I feel like that tonnage is just being used to meet deliveries elsewhere in the physical market. So once this sort of Western selling of ETF products, which then leads to physical selling to the East, is finished, that's, we should have a nice bounce from there. And I don't know if we're there yet or not, but certainly the sentiment and some of the commentary I've been hearing lately are what you'd hear at some sort of a bottom, maybe not the final bottom, but some sort of midterm bottom. We'll have to see. It's such a manipulated market, and it's so opaque that, it's very difficult to know what's really going to happen in the near term. And I sort of given up on that in a lot of ways as of late.
Of course, the simple fact that the biggest gold holdings, or at least the biggest concentrated gold holdings, are in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats means that, very few people make the decisions, right? So it's very easy for the market to move in ways that are driven by things that are not public information.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the fact that, the more we see about, and I'm just talking about the U.S. government because that's obviously the government that I am forced to slave under. You see with what they're doing with the NSA spying and everything else, and it's a clear, and the wars and the interventions, and it's very clear that there's nothing that the power structure in the United States and indeed the West will not do to maintain the status quo. And
so do you consider Snowden a hero and a whistleblower, or do you consider him a traitor?
I think I think he'll go down as one of the greatest American heroes of all time. And I think that the Snowden leaks will go down as one of the most important global events of all time. Now, that's in my positive outlook of the future. In a future in which Snowden is deemed a traitor, that's a world I don't even want to live in. So I'm assuming that Snowden, the Snowden effect snowballs positively into the future as the public and more importantly, the younger generation becomes aware of how duplicitous and downright evil and immoral these Western governments are. And we move to change it gradually and effectively. And so I think it's going to be, I think he is a hero, and I think he'll be seen as one of the most important figures in American history. And potentially world history. We'll see. In fact,
there is quite a generation gap there, because the same people who consider Woodward and Bernstein heroes for Watergate seem to be the first to jump on Snowden and think that he's some kind of traitor for revealing secrets.
Yeah, I hate to say this, even though I feel it, and I love my parents to death, and they've been wonderful in every way to me. But I think that I've given up on that the baby generation. I mean, they're the only people I know that are still, like, at least in the United States, we have these two fake parties, the Democrats and Republicans, that basically bicker over non-important social issues to get people angry at each other, based on cultural or geographic lines, and they're the only group that I continue to hear, like talking about, Democrats or Republicans. It's such a childish thing, but they're just wrapped up in the past. It's a generational thing. And actually, and I hate to say this, but I think it's true, that it's kind of a waiting game for us as far as, the people that are going to have to live on this planet for the next, let's say, 40 to 60 years. We just have to kind of wait these baby boomers out, because they're stubborn. They still dominate wealth-wise. They still dominate politically, and we're under their thumb still as younger generations. And once they just get older and go away, I think that's when we're going to have the real chance to change things, and it will happen. But
it's true that they're still in charge, but I always worry. I am very optimistic as you are, and I think things will change for the better. But I always worry that what may replace them may not be people who care more about freedom, people who are more outraged at the excesses of government, people who want a bit more rationality, but maybe we'll get some more, even more irrational young people who react to the crisis and react to the hardships by, I don't know, looking for a man in a white horse or some radical new old theory that has already been proven failed.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest fear, and not anymore as much as it was. When I first started waking up to this stuff in 2007, let's say, and then really got into it in the years ahead, I was terrified of what you just said. Terrified to the point that I, was looking for a second passport. Was because we know how history goes with these sorts of things, and in a lot of ways dedicated my life to doing what I'm doing now because I was so afraid of that. And I felt like it was my duty as part of the people, explaining what's going on, what the problems is, to get this information out to as many people as possible before, it gets really, really bad, so that when it does get really, really bad, we have a well-defined solutions, or we've at least identified the true culprits and the true problem effectively enough. And I think we're doing that. I really do.
I'm sorry. So you don't think that people are going to just, under 20-year-olds aren't going to jump up and say, oh, this was all the 1%'s fault. We should expropriate. We should tax them to extinction or something.
I think that sort of thing could happen for sure. And there's no telling how this will exactly play out. But I will tell you this: that my experience has been, and it continues to be proven day by day, that at least in the United States where I live, the counter, let's say, ideology that's popular within, let's say, the progressive left and the libertarian right has so many things in common. And, civil liberties being one of them, money, lobbying, and politics, the military-industrial complex being opposed to that, GMOs, Monsanto. These are issues that are existential. Yes, they're across the board. Yes, and those are the issues I see people passionate about. I watched a video and I posted on my site from there were these anti-Monsanto rallies in May all over the world, I believe, and I watched the one in Denver, Colorado, which is the capital of the state I live in, and I was so impressed to see these young kids that were anti-Monsanto. That was their primary concern. Talking about the Federal Reserve. And not only that, the guy that was leading the charge of this rally kept saying, without the Fed, there's no Monsanto. And so this link is being made and it's happening. And so I'm very encouraged by that. And I don't think that, now we don't know, because the United States hasn't collapsed yet or hasn't had serious problems like many countries in Europe to really tell what our true colors are going to be. But I continue to be encouraged.
Oh, you can definitely be much more hopeful for the United States than for other countries, I'm sure. The entire Ron Paul presidential election campaign was such a wake-up call to many people in the States, and we've had nothing even remotely similar, at least in Spain or France. Or the alternatives here are just as unsavory as the status quo, I have to say.
Yeah. There's I guess like Nigel Farage, I like up in the UK, and he's charismatic, well spoken, and seems to be, saying a lot of the same things as the Ron Paul movement. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not familiar enough with like France or Spain's politics to know. But yeah, from what I do have read, I would seem to agree with what you're saying.
And you, Michael, you accept Bitcoin donations on your website, on your blog. How's that going?
Yeah, well, lately when the price has gone up, I haven't gotten as many donations, but it was a reasonably steady trickle, and then the price went up a lot, and then the donations slowed down, which I don't, it doesn't surprise anyone, right? Everyone's got $1,000 price targets in their eyes, so all of a sudden they don't want to give them out, but the reason my position on Bitcoin, I've been very clear about it from the beginning when I started talking about it, is that I support it completely because I support anything that is a free market alternative to monopoly currency. And by monopoly, it's like a double entendre, right? It's like the game monopoly, and it also they have a monopoly on its creation. The central banks do. So that's why I support it. And a lot of people in the gold and silver community are anti-Bitcoin, which I find very strange to understand philosophically. But no, for me, it's look, anything, whether it's just coupons or whether it's Crested Butte bucks, which they have out here in a little town in Colorado, local currency, anything that any medium of exchange human beings want to use to exchange with each other in voluntary transactions, I support. And Bitcoin just happens to be one of the ones that has a lot of momentum behind it. Now it has venture capital money behind it. And so that's why I sort of focused on it. Also, I like the fact that there is no Bitcoin company to go to. Because as we know, the governments of the world will call someone up and say, hey, if you don't do this, this, and this, we're going to shut you down. And they can, whereas with Bitcoin, you can't, there's no central office to shut down, which I really like.
Of course, we've seen that vulnerability come into play many times before over the past few years with digital currencies. But one concern, which I don't share, but which I hear raised very often, is about digital currency and privacy. Because we've talked about Snowden, we talked about the NSA recording all kinds of internet data, about all these Google and all these companies collaborating with them, even though at the same time they deny that they do. Don't you think that Bitcoin is vulnerable to data mining and to someone like some government trying to control it through these mechanisms?
Well, I mean, look, I think the concept of digital currency is two-sided. On the one side, if you assume there's no government, right, no spying or none of that, then digital currency is obviously like a pretty good thing. But of course, we don't live in that fantasy world. What I would say to that is that Bitcoin, in the manifesto of the creator or creators of Bitcoin, they were very clear philosophically where they're coming from, and they tried to make it as anonymous as possible. And I believe that the market will sort that out. It's like, for example, there already are, not that I've used them, but there are launder. It's not, I don't like to use that word, but I guess it's like Bitcoin shuffling agencies where essentially you can send your Bitcoins to a service that will then like mix it in with a bunch of other Bitcoins and you'll get other ones out. So, to make it less traceable. So there are things you can do. And I think more and more they'll develop things you can do to make it more anonymous. It's really up to you as a Bitcoin user how anonymous you want to make it, or how far you want to go. But you can make it relatively anonymous, from what I know. But for people to assume that if you just get a wallet and you start spending Bitcoins, that's anonymous. Well, no, that's not the case. So yeah, I mean, we need to be very worried. But what I always say to people is this: it's like, look. I become worried about Bitcoin or any digital currency when it becomes a monopoly currency. So if we have a digital currency that then the state or central banks force us to use in as preference to other currencies, then right there you lose my support.
Exactly. As long as it's voluntary,
yes.
Any failures that it has can just be, you can just move to an alternative.
Exactly.
And one of the wonderful things about Bitcoin is that it sparked this whole revolution. There's all these copycats and alternative digital cryptocurrencies that has sprung up, inspired by the example of Bitcoin, claiming to be better in one way or another. Who knows if they are, but
right.
That's one of the great things about it.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's all part of the same trend, which has to do with privacy, and encryption. And it's just, even if Bitcoin does nothing else, and this is what I've said from the beginning, it's like, I don't know that Bitcoin is going to be the answer. I don't think there is an answer anyway, but it's the process that matters. And what Bitcoin does is teach people. It makes them ask questions. Well, why did Bitcoin come about? What's the philosophy behind Bitcoin? Do I agree with that philosophy? Hey, look at what the NSA is doing. We need more stuff. And like this post I just wrote right before I got on with you has to do with this search engine called DuckDuckGo, which I had heard of, or never used. And the founder of it doesn't track anything. So, what the quote in The Guardian said was, if the NSA asks for data, we don't have any data, which is great. And, I'm going to start using it and see how I like it. But and he said that the traffic has surged. I think it was 50% right after Snowden's leaks came out. Their traffic surged. So again, I think all of this is really good. People are inherently lazy, for sure. I get it. But, when something smacks them in the face like Edward Snowden's or Revelations, and there are alternatives there, people will try the alternatives. And I'm an example of that. I will try DuckDuckGo, and I encourage other people to check it out as well.
I'll check it out as well. Just going back a second, one more thing about the Bitcoin donations. How long? Because there's loads of bloggers out there who think this is some kind of very complicated thing for programmers or whatever. How long did it take you to set up a donation address at your blog?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. Now, I happen to have a tech person that helps me with my site, who's very smart. So he does this stuff for me, and he got me up to speed on it over the course of a few hours. I basically decided one day, hey, I want to get Bitcoin up. Tell me about it. And he did, and he got it up, and it was very easy. But what I found also is there are so many resources now, whether it's you go to BitPay or you go on the internet, and you can find these videos where all you have to do is watch a few videos, and it'll explain to you how to do everything, how to download a wallet, how to buy Bitcoins, how to get them, so it's actually really easy. For me, it was even easier because I had someone that's very technically savvy. But since then, I've done a lot of things on my own, like like a wallet on my PC and things, and playing around with sending Bitcoins. And I even launched a T-shirt on my site. I made a T-shirt that says "Bought with Bitcoin," which I'm only selling for Bitcoin. So that was something that I decided to do again to just see how easy it would be. And integrating BitPay and doing that was so simple that it was shocking. So I think it's more scary for people when they first hear about it. It sounds confusing and they don't even want to try it. But my suggestion would be, hey, check out some videos and then try it. Try it for yourself. And everyone that I've explained it to and that has tried it for themselves has found it pretty easy to do once you actually get down to doing it and get over the fear of it. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, in fact, you can probably set up a donation address in about 30 seconds on a blog, right? It's just a bit of text.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You just need to have an address. It's like any other page on a website. You just create a banner and it links back, and you say, well, send them here, and you have a QR code or an address, and it's simple. Yeah, it's very simple.
Because this is all actually this sort of brings me to the point that the whole idea behind Bitcoin and behind many of the things that we talk about is this whole fight between centralized power, centralized control, central planning, and decentralized systems, markets, freedom.
Yeah, that's why I stopped writing as much about gold and silver and the financial system as I used to, because as you say, what's happening in the world right now, it's every aspect of our lives that have been centralized behind our backs, whether it's the food production industry or the medical industry or the financial industry. It's or the military industrial complex. It's all been centralized aggressively behind our backs to control us and to solidify positions of power for those that are very rich and powerful. And what I believe the future is, and the future of freedom will be, and it really is only allowed to work, I think, well because of the internet and connectivity, is aggressive decentralization. And that doesn't mean, of course, being separated. Like, look at us right now having this conversation over the Atlantic, right? Right. We'll be more connected than ever, but we'll be more free to determine how we live than ever through decentralization. And I fundamentally believe humanity does not need centralized government. I think that centralized power, aggressively pyramid structures of political power, all of that stuff basically encourage psychopaths to become at the top and then ruin all of our lives in society. So take those pyramids down, live in a more flat, decentralized world where we're more connected than ever. Humanity is more connected than ever across the world, across continents, across races, across cultures and religions and everything. Because I believe that humans are essentially pretty good and fine. And our biggest problem for thousands of years is simply this, that the small percentage of crazy psychopaths, sociopaths tend to get in control of political power, and then they run it in a very hierarchical, pyramidal structure. And
once the structure is there, it really just attracts psychopaths. You'd have to be a psychopath, an egomaniac, to really want to rule over people like a Maharaja.
Right. And you see also, if you watch, I mean, the incredible similarities, if you watch gang movies to respected politics in the world, it's the same, right? It's like these guys that become leaders of gangs are the ones that will go out and kill everyone above them and will kill anyone below them that threatens their power. And,
Yeah, there was a phrase in the Road to Serfdom by Hayek, which, in fact, I think it was a whole chapter called "The Worst Rise to the Top."
Yep. No, exactly. I mean, I love that book, and I actually wrote a little summary of it 2 years ago on my site. But yeah, I remember that chapter. It was one of the best chapters. And yeah, it's human nature, and that's why. I mean, that's what people need to understand. It's like these structures, these hierarchical, extremely hierarchical political structures do not work. They don't work for us. They work for a very small minority of the sociopaths. And it's I fundamentally believe that 100 years from now, our grandchildren and great grandchildren, will look back and say, how, just the way we look back at slavery now. They'll look back at our political systems and our Federal Reserve and fiat money and central banking. I believe they will look at that as the way we look at slavery.
And the way we look at the Soviet Union, right?
Exactly.
To say, how could they even imagine that was going to work?
Right. It will be that preposterous, and it will be that unfathomable. But that's the interesting thing about all this, right? It's that whenever you're in a situation in the present, it's easy to look back into the past and say, oh well, if I lived in slavery times, I've definitely been an abolitionist or opposed to it. But of course, 90% of those people wouldn't be. They would go along to get along. They would shut up, and they would try to increase their socioeconomic position without any regard to the morality of the systems in place at the time. And that's what's happening now. It's just crazy how as amazing as human beings are, it's incredible how short-sighted we can be too, and in groups. I think it's a Nietzsche quote, right, where he said like. I think it was him, something to the degree of insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups it's the norm. Yeah, I think that's true.
Nevertheless, we're not nihilists here. We're very optimistic, and I grow ever more optimistic when I see people like you writing libertyblitzkrieg.com and worrying about these kinds of things. Michael, I'm going to say goodbye here. Thank you very much for being on the Gold Money podcast. Actually, we could talk so much more, but we've run out of time. So I'd very much like to have you back, and hopefully we will see a much better world in the future.
Thanks for the kind words, Felix, and I very much enjoyed the interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.